Good morning, Saitlanders. How are you? I hope that you're well. I have never struggled to make a video like I have with this one. I'm not going to bore you with all of the details, but for 4 weeks, I've been wrestling with this simple topic. Man, it's a straightforward topic, as you're going to hear right now. And his instruction was, apparently based upon a request, to produce a video in simple English, straightforward English, not too technical, on how people might prepare for the coming financial collapse. Very briefly, I'm going to go through how this thing started. You can go back a century, you can go back more than that, but about 13 years ago it began when some very clever guys began to describe technical and very academic and scholarly reasons why there would be an enormous financial collapse. Now, 13 years ago was 2008, and that was at the time of the 2008-9-10 financial crisis. But they weren't talking about that. That could have been it, but it wasn't. So, what they were saying is, for X, Y, and Z reasons, there has to be an enormous financial collapse. Along comes 2009, and it's not that bad, not that bad. And people say to these guys, well, you were wrong. And they say, no, we weren't wrong. X, Y, and Z reasons mean that there must be an enormous collapse. It could have happened now in 2008, 2009, but the government printed money out of thin air. It rescued banks that it shouldn't have rescued, blah, 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 blah. So it's basically papered over the cracks in the wall. And now you're saying that they're not there. We're saying they are still there. Behind the wallpaper are these cracks. This crisis is coming. About 18 months ago, give or take, two things happened. So we're talking during the course of 2019. Firstly, is firstly the right way to say it? Let's say firstly. There was a huge exodus, unprecedented in history, never before seen, of CEOs from top companies, Fortune 500, the top 1,000 companies in the world, etc., etc. Particularly in the West, that is to say, Europe and North America. And more particularly in North America, and more particularly in the United States of America. But we're talking global conglomerates, the biggest companies in the world. And at the time it went largely unnoticed. It was only by the end of 2019 that entities like Hedge began to observe really this phenomenon. And again, it wasn't really picked up on. The big mainstream sources didn't pay much attention to it, but it occurred. For some reason, which nobody knows to this day, many, the highest proportion by far in history of the top business people in the world abandoned their posts. And this is not the second thing that happened. It's part of the first thing. We're still on number one. Many millionaires and billionaires began to hunt frantically, including some of these CEOs who'd left, for alternative, let's say, bug out solutions, emergency solutions, vlugoplossings, veilige gebiede, groen zones, bunkers, and so on. So much so that old nuclear missile silos in the USA began to be bought up, left, right, and center, and converted into bunkers for billionaires. And there was a record number of applications for passport, let's say successful immigration by billionaires to New Zealand, which is regarded as perhaps going to be the safest place in the world in the event of a global collapse. Okay, so those two things occurred concerning millionaires, billionaires, and CEOs. But a second major event took place, and that was in 2019, we're still in 2019, that a new group of people began to say that the doom prophets from 2008 had been right all along. And that in fact, the cracks in the wall of the global economy had become more and more and more visible. And then in 2020, a whole lot of millionaires and billionaires and hedge fund founders and hedge fund CEOs and what have you joined this growing chorus. Initially, the hardcore, the people from 2008, loosely, had been dismissed because there were many eccentrics among them. And it's easy to dismiss an eccentric person. Many of the brightest people of history, the cleverest, smartest, sharpest people have been a little bit odd. And the first guys who started screaming these warnings include a number of oddballs, brilliant people, but people who it is easy to mock, people whom it is easy to satirize, people whom it is easy to lampoon. But by 2019, the people who were talking about this stuff were no longer just that group of eccentrics. And by 2020, again, I use this analogy of the chorus, this growing chorus, the latest converts to this chorus were the richest, the most successful, the most powerful, the most competent, the most capable people in the world, or some of them. And so that's kind of an introduction, maybe a bit of a long introduction to what we're going to talk about. The idea, such as expressed on this screen over here, that a global financial collapse, in fact, a global financial collapse unlike anything ever seen in history with no exceptions, by a long way. I want to emphasize this to you. A global financial collapse, but not just a global financial collapse. A global financial collapse which is by a long way the worst in history, such as mankind has ever seen. That's what we're talking about. Perhaps I'm wrong. Perhaps Ray Dalio, the founder of Bridgewater Asset Management, the world's largest hedge fund, is wrong. Perhaps Scott Minerd, a man who's famous for twice making himself a billionaire, perhaps he's wrong. Perhaps Paul Tudor Jones is wrong. Perhaps Peter Schiff is wrong, Gerald Celente, Mike Maloney, what's this other guy, man? He's so good. I can't think of his name. Perhaps Harry S. Dent Jr. is wrong. Perhaps Jim Rickards is wrong. Perhaps all of those CEOs who fled in 2019 are wrong. Perhaps all of the people, the millions, the many people, the many millionaires and billionaires who are building underground bunkers, who are taking half of their fortunes, are wrong. But the fact remains, that is the theme of today's conversation. There is a threat of a global financial collapse in the world. I'm not going to go into the details because then we will get technical, and then I will not have been able to fulfill the command, the instruction, the direct instruction given to me by Mr. Miller. But let it suffice to say that there are very good reasons why these boffins are saying, heavens above, this ship is going to sink, and there is absolutely no way to save it. We can lie, cheat and steal, we can bull dust one another, but we cannot stop this ship from sinking. Okay. What to do in such an event? How do you prepare for it? I don't know. That's the gist of this video. I don't know. We have spoken at length in previous videos. If I'm not mistaken, we have done something like 80 videos on specific items that one can invest in, prepare, buy, store, hoard, stockpile. And unless I'm very much mistaken, at least it's somewhere between 30 and 36 of those very specific videos, very specific videos, highly specific videos, can be found on YouTube still. I'm not going to go into whether you should buy goats, whether you should get a weaving loom, what type of chickens are best, although I can tell you that yesterday I slaughtered my kapok because the size of the eggs that the hens were producing, although they are not kapok hens, was too small, unacceptably small relative to the amount of feed that I was investing in my chickens. So I slaughtered the kapok, and I got a verfhoender from the township of Hoenderhaan, and he looks like he's a good specimen, and he seems to be quite bedryvig onder die henne. Let's see. I'm not going to tell you what to do with your pension, but I'm going to tell you this. I'm going to tell you 3 interwoven stories, interrelated stories, very briefly. Some time ago, my father and I chatted about pensions. And you know that you and I, have spoken about the looming threat of prescribed assets, whereby the government dictates under law that pension funds must invest a certain proportion of their assets, in other words, the money that they hold on behalf of pension investors, must invest a proportion of it. There was a suggestion at one time that it was 6%, but it's now been confirmed that it'll be 20% in civil engineering government projects. Not civil engineering, government projects, state projects. Building of hospitals, building of roads, repairing of potholes, guardrails next to the road, painting of road lines, paint for a new school, whatever the case. And I won't go into what my dad and I discussed let's leave that to the side for 1 second and skip forward to about, today is Wednesday, about a week ago. A good friend of mine who's a farmer called me and asked me for some advice on selling his farm and buying another. He really needed somebody to speak to, even though he knew that he was speaking to me, I, who am not a farmer. And I said to him, I'm not qualified to advise you. However, if I had been in your shoes, not if I was you, and if you were me, no, just me as I am, if I had been in your shoes, in your circumstances, if I, with my personality, my knowledge, my skills, my whatever, was the owner of your farm, confronted by the prevailing circumstances in the region, I would do it. But I could be wrong. Fine. Yesterday, Tuesday the 13th of April, I was contacted by a former friend, a friend who is a former colleague in the live event industry in which I worked for many years. I won't give his identity away by making too much of a close description of him. Let it suffice to say that he was once, he's still in the industry, but he's kind of become a bit of a prepper, a bit of a survivalist, a bit of a Saitlander. He was once the #1 guy in South Africa during the heyday of live events in South Africa in his field, very specific niche, the top guy. So he's a sensible man. And he said to me, look, we're thinking of doing this, we're thinking of doing that, we're thinking of maybe this, maybe we leave, maybe we sell, maybe we move. What do you think? And I said to him what I said to my farmer friend a week ago. If I was you, if I was in your shoes, if I was in your circumstances, I would have done it already. But I could have been wrong. Now we come back to my dad and the pension story. If I was in my dad's shoes, with my knowledge, my weaknesses, my faults, my flaws, my blemishes, my strengths, I would have made a move concerning my pension already. But I could be wrong, and I could have been wrong already. I could have been wrong when I made the move, and I could still be wrong for seeing it that way and thinking that way now. So, am I giving you any advice? Not really. Not really, not if the truth be told. However, may it be a lesson to you that we are observing phenomena in the world today, such as you can see on the screen, such as they're talking about here. An unbelievable increase in the price of food in the USA. That foreshadow, or which foreshadow, a global financial catastrophe. Only our Lord knows whether it will happen in a day, a week, a month, or a year. But there is reason for people, there is good reason for people to do as these people did. They approached Mr. Miller. They said to him, I suppose they spoke about many things, and they said, oh, by the way, incidentally, before we forget, please will you tell Simon to produce a video in simple terms about what does one do to prepare for that time that lies ahead, if we talk about global financial crisis, financial collapse, and so on. There is, even if I'm not giving you great advice today, there is reason enough to ask the question, and perhaps if we ask the question enough, we will come a little bit closer to good advice. That's it. Thank you very much for watching this video. And hopefully, God willing, in the days and weeks to come, we will find the divine inspiration to make a follow-up video, which perhaps goes just one more step further in discussing, in simple terms, the real reasons why we should be taking real action, looking at what is actually happening right now. How much is the price of timber increasing? Should we then be thinking about investing in timber? How much is the price of silver increasing? Should we be thinking of investing in silver, or should we be getting a hide? Do you know what a hide is? A hide is the English word. There were obviously Scandinavian words, a Flemish word, Dutch, German, Portuguese, Spanish. The English word for a universal concept in Europe up until about 150 years ago, I suppose, maybe 200 years ago, namely the minimum size of land required to sustain a free family. And the concept depended upon terrain and topography and this, that, the next thing. Anyway, I won't give the game away. I won't tell you what the size of land is. We can speak about it another time. For now, thank you for watching this video. I'm sorry we couldn't give you more direct, on the money, spot on, reliable advice, but let's keep talking about it. Goodbye and God bless you.